everybody, and welcome to another There's a Will. This installment comes to you in early February, the first week of February. And joining me in studio is Nicholas, no relation, Richardson.
Delighted to be here once more.
It's good to see you.
Of course it is.
Yeah, you're confidence, I like that. And, and joining us for this cheerful topic we have today, we're gonna find some jokes in it.
I'm sure we will.
Is because let's face it, the end of the world is funny, you know. And joining us on the Skypeophone is Olgerd Ujimbwo.
Hello.
I practiced. It doesn't do me any good.
It's excellent, actually.
Was that okay? I was practicing while I was brushing my teeth, which is why it sounds like I have something in my mouth when I'm saying it. How are you today, Olgerd?
Well, I'm quite okay. Still alive,
Yeah.
despite all the all the things that people say that we're all gonna die, the end is nigh, and so on.
The end is nigh. We're all going to die. It's a little poem, isn't it?
Well,
What about you?
we're obviously not going to die because it's already tomorrow in Australia, so we can be sure we're going not to die today.
Mm-hmm. So the international dateline
Yes.
is keeping us...
It's keeping us going.
It's vivifying
It's
us.
remarkable. It costs
Yeah.
no money. It's fantastic, and it keeps us going, and we should be very grateful.
It's incredible.
It is.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but Australia is already into the next day, so there you go. Are they? I think they are.
Technically, yes, just.
Yeah, just. So looking into, I was reading about the Polynesian Islands recently. So I was thinking, where is a good place to go if the world is about to...
Well, you say it's here.
Oh, there's the world. That's it. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got a whole world in his hand. He's got a whole wide... Yes.
Goodness
That's a
me.
catchy tune.
It is.
I think he's got a good baritone going.
He has.
Anyway, so we're talking about Armageddon. It's always a subject that makes me chuckle.
Yes.
There's nothing like millenarianism. Is it millenarianism or
Something like
millennialism?
Something like that.
Millenarianism.
it's the former.
Millenarianism, I guess it is.
The
Yes.
former.
Yeah. What is it?
Millenarianism, and it is...
Millenarianism. Yeah.
It keeps on repeating itself during the history of the humankind.
It keeps happening, doesn't it? And the world has happened many times over.
And actually, it happens. I always repeat the old joke, you know, about the lady that was foreseeing the future. She was able to see the future. All the villages nearby were coming to her, and everybody got scared because she said, on the 11th of the next month, the world is going to end. And everybody was running scared, and everybody was selling everything. They were prepared to die. And then what happened on the 11th of the next month?
What happened?
She died.
She died, so the world did end for her.
Yes.
Which?
And that's the whole thing. The world ends all the time for somebody.
Yes. And so that's what that's a kind of human instinct. There's also what Freud talked about, the death wish, isn't there? The comfort of the long dirt nap, right? So as Larry King called it. That's what he called. That's what he said.
No, but those are the tropes that are repeating in the human history. The end of the world, everything was better in the golden age.
Were things ever better than they are now? Olga?
Yeah, yeah.
As our academic, the studious one in this group of layabouts, in this duo of layabouts.
Speak for yourself.
Nicholas is very thrifty with his time. He won't let me get away with that. Has there ever been a better time than now?
Well,
I had a relative who used to say, wait, before you answer, I had a relative who used to say, I could draw a better century out of a hat. He loved the 18th century. He was an art historian. He loved the 18th century. And that's what you say. And I always wondered, I mean, I like the 18th century too, but
I like the 18th century as well, yeah.
Really, it was an amazing time. But, I mean, we haven't been there. No. But we read about it. That's how we know.
We see the buildings they produce.
And we see
the art.
The beautiful.
And we listen to the music.
We see the memoirs of the rich people.
And the revolution.
But I don't think you would like to be serf in the 18th century.
Yeah. Would you like to be what?
A serf, a person that was serving.
Well, no, this is the point. Is if you look at the average life now or in the 18th century, we really don't have a lot to complain about, do we?
We don't. I mean,
there's this. I really like the guy. Do you know Steven Pinker?
Yes, I have a quote from him, but we'll talk about him. Go ahead. I'm glad you brought him up.
No, because Steven Pinker did a proper research, and he said that there was never such a low number of military conflicts compared to the number of people that participate in them in the history of humankind. Of course, the Ukrainian war is breaking that up a bit, but still, it's pretty peaceful in this century.
Yeah, I mean, the wars are smaller, but and there's fewer of them. But of course, the one that's close in Ukraine now is particularly troubling in Central Europe and has ramifications, which is part of the reason that we're talking about, if not wholly the reason that we're talking about this subject today, because the Doomsday Clock came out, and Mr. Pinker, Steven Pinker, has interesting things to say about the Doomsday Clock. Their prediction came out a couple of weeks ago, or 10 days ago, and on the 23rd of January, and said that basically they moved, they moved the hands of the clock, the closest ever, to 90 seconds before midnight. Now, is this a fatuous statement, or is there something to it, and why? What do you think?
Hard to say. I remember, not recently, you brought it up, but I mean, I remember years ago when you listened to the radio occasionally, to be on BBC Radio 4 in the morning, that they've moved the Doomsday Clock somewhere and then somebody discussed it, but I'd forgotten about the Doomsday Clock till you brought it up yesterday. I mean, the reality is, just to go back to the previous point, if you look at on any analysis now, this is the best time to have lived. If you look at sort of important things like access to fresh water, if you look at the number of, throughout the world, the number of women dying in childbirth, the access to education, it's never been as good for as many people as it is now. There are, in individual countries,
or access to jobs, perhaps.
Yeah, there are particular problems, and we all sort of look back to this golden age where everything worked. And particularly, if you look at it from a British viewpoint or an American viewpoint, you might say, well, 100 years ago things were better because we were in charge and everything ran properly, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at it in a sort of more general analysis, it probably is the best time to be alive. But look at the opportunities that you have.
Yeah, you read Dickens and now you see it was not that well
exactly
done.
Yeah, and you look at the opportunities you have through technological advances. We each have in our pocket this little device for which we have access to the sum total of human knowledge, every piece of music ever made, ever written or performed, every film ever filmed, every book ever written. In theory, we can get to it via this little device in our pocket. And if that isn't something miraculous, I really don't know what is. But instead of which we don't do that.
It's an endless educational
tool. We post photographs of our cats or what we had for lunch or something.
I don't understand that.
I don't understand it either.
I mean, I like cats.
And I once posted as a joke a picture of a plate I just finished eating from, and it got more interest than when I post, for example, the link to this program. I mean, shocking, really. I
had another idea for a post of your meal the next day.
Yes.
I thought would be appropriate, but inappropriately appropriate.
Yes.
And I didn't do it because, well, it seems going too far, but you see the point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Olga, you wanted to jump in with something, and we talked over you.
No, it's just, I absolutely agree with you that the difference is not in what people do, it's just the opportunities they have.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference. We do have opportunity to learn as much as we want. You can use the phone to listen to music, or you listen to podcasts. You can listen to podcasts about, I don't know, cutting ice, or you can listen to podcasts about, I don't know, the human evolution, or you can listen to cat podcasts. I don't know.
So
the difference is we have opportunities, and it's something that never existed in this amount equally to so many people.
Right. So absolutely, both of you. Couldn't have said it better myself. In fact, I'm glad I didn't have to.
Exactly.
Because that's why you're here.
Yes.
Talking about the Doomsday Clock, though, you have to realize that we've been much closer to the doom. All those years back, during the Soviet Union times, there was actually this this Russian hero, I never remember his name, a Soviet Union officer that made the decision not to launch the
submarine
rockets.
captain.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
And he made the decision that he did not launch the rockets.
1984, 1983?
Yeah. It was during my lifetime, so I know I should be thankful to him for my life.
Yes, that's a true story.
And this is the issue about Doomsday. It's not because somebody is going to sit down in Washington or Moscow or Beijing or Peking, as I prefer to call it, to launch a missile. It's going to be an accident. It's always an accident which catches people out. It's the Dr. Strangelove scenario.
Just tell us what the Dr. Strangelove...
Well, in Dr. Strangelove, it's a film about they accidentally set off the American B-52 nuclear bombers to bomb Russia. And then they realise it's been a hoax or been a mistake because some American commander at some airbase went a bit gaga. And they recall all the planes, but unfortunately one plane had its communication system damaged, and they couldn't call it back. And that
happens to be a plane with an amazing pilot.
Yes, exactly.
Who can fly 3 feet over the ground.
That sort of thing. Yes. So that's what it's about. And the end of the film is just this.
So it's an accident.
It's an accident.
That's ultimately the whole point of the film.
It's an accident. Yes. And that's why, funnily enough, going back in history slightly, when Ronald Reagan had his neutron bomb, which was designed to actually cut out your enemy's communications. In a funny sort of way, the last thing you want to do in any conflict, particularly a modern conflict, is destroy your enemy's ability to communicate, because the message you may want to get through to your enemy is, let's stop this nonsense. And if they can't communicate, if you have men or women in places where they have capacity to destroy things and nobody can tell them to stop, that is where I think if we have a problem, that's where it's going to lie. I don't think it'll be a deliberate attempt to destroy the world. I think it will be an accident somewhere.
We're much more likely to have an accident that leads to this kind of nuclear destruction. But is that the only threat?
Well, you see, this is why they've changed the rules of the climate clock. the
Doomsday clock.
Doomsday clock, because now they've actually added climate damage to it. Yeah. So they're jumping on the sort of wokest bandwagon. Look, there's no doubt about it. The climate is changing. We can see, even in my time in Warsaw, the winter and the summer climates have changed dramatically, and that's in a couple of decades. So the climate is changing. Whether we have caused that or whether we can actually do anything about it, I remain sceptical of it. I think, as do many scientists. Unfortunately, like many things in life, the zeitgeist is yes, we have to stop everything, get rid of your cars, etc., to save the planet. We're not going to, for two reasons. One, I don't think that is going to save it. And B, the countries where they are making these changes, Scandinavia, parts of the United States, United Kingdom, are such a small proportion of the problem that it's irrelevant, because even in Germany, they are destroying wind farms to get to the coal underneath. I mean, if that's not crazy, I don't know what is. Australia, India, China, the countries that largely cause these problems, are completely indifferent anyway. So the idea that you and I shouldn't drive a car or shouldn't take our groceries home in a carrier bag is completely nonsensical and makes no difference at all. What we should be doing is the things we know are good. Like, we should actually say, well, let's not destroy the environment we have. Let's not destroy the rainforest. Let's be a bit more careful about the way we use our existing resources. I think that is sensible.
Did you know I'm an environmentalist?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I am, but a practical one, because...
You certainly recycle all your jokes.
Yeah, I recycle all the... What?
Let's translate some Chinese jokes, and then you from China.
Excellent.
That will be completely new.
Oh gosh, could you send me some? And I'll be sure to make them over and steal happily the Chinese jokes.
Wondering
do they
about
have jokes in China?
the Doomsday clock. What is their methodology? I don't really understand. And how does the China figure in it?
Well, exactly. A lot of these things,
Well, I mean, the point of talking about this is one of the points we've already made, two of the points we've already made, which are probably the most crucial that we can expand on. One of them is that it's always the end of the world for someone. This is like Ayn Rand, the writer, and some people call her a philosopher. Certainly had a unique point of view. Ayn Rand said that when she dies, the world dies. That was her view. But then someone like Christopher Hitchens would say that's extremely that her whole philosophy was extremely selfish, and that's a very selfish
But Christopher
point
Hitchens,
of view.
of course.
But in fact, it's practically quite true.
But Christopher Hitchens, of course, is famously, I don't know whether he was agnostic or atheist, but I mean...
Atheist.
So in a sense, she was, on his terms, she was right. Because if you have no belief in a divinity or life after death, then by definition, for you, the world does end when you die. So he's criticising her for having a belief which I
Very
assume
similar to
is the same as his.
Well, he was very fluent
He was.
highly...
But he did make the interesting point. So I was watching the other week on YouTube an interview he did with Jeremy. I think it was
So even when you disagree with him, he's fun to listen to.
Yes, with Jeremy
That's the point.
Paxman. I think it was with Jeremy Paxman, shortly before he died.
Yeah.
And he said, well, look, as an atheist, I would hope that if I'm wrong and I get to meet God, he would at least respect me for having had a point of view and not being hypocritical about believing in God and then behaving in a way which is completely contrary.
That was Pascal's wager. He said, they said, why don't you just believe in God in case there is a God and you die?
Hitchens thought, well, like God would be more respect me for my honesty, which was a more intellectually honest position than for paying lip service. Yeah, I think remarkable. And there's a lot of him on YouTube. It's well worth listening to.
It's very Augustinian of him, actually.
A very compelling person to listen to. His argument is fantastic.
Yeah.
His ability to argue
his brother is
rationally,
good too.
even if you disagree with what his actual conclusion or the point of view he is supporting, the way he does it is so elegant.
Yeah, and that you could say the same of someone like William F. Buckley.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is just fun to watch.
In a day when, and that's at a time when we had people in the public space who were contributing to discussions in an educated, rational, and attractive way. Whereas now it's just a load of people with opinions shouting at each other.
Very annoying.
And there's no actual debate. There's very little rational input. It's just, I'm right, you're wrong, and because I'm right and you're wrong, you have sacrificed your right even to contribute to the debate. Shut up. This is the modern discourse.
Yeah.
Something which Hitchens and people of his generation, people of his intellectual stature, an approach they would never have adopted.
Well, this is a good point. We're getting a bit off the subject. We'll come back in a second, but I just to cap what you're saying in a pleasant way, not to compete with what you're saying, because I agree, is that Hitchens was a young Trotskyite, and Buckley was in the CIA, working in Mexico when he was the same age as Hitchens, coming out of Oxford. And Buckley was quite happy to have Hitchens come on his show many times and have a civilized discussion. But of course, Hitchens became, as traditionally happens, more conservative the older he got, till eventually he supported very un-Trotskyite intervention in Iraq. Which is another subject. I don't want to get into that. That's a can of worms.
Have you guys read C.S. Lewis?
Yes, Screwtape
Cosmic
Letters,
Trilogy?
for example. Yeah. What?
The Cosmic Trilogy, the last part. You remember the Scotsman scientist?
I have not read that, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, he's exactly what you're talking about. He was on the good side, which were all, as we know, C.S. Lewis was Christian, so we're pretty Christianite. We're on the side of Aslan, who is symbolizing the Christ. And he was self-professed atheist, not believing, being entirely logical at the same time, being able to side with the good. So we cannot be exclusive in this kind of approach.
I have a question. Can I follow that up with a question, since you brought up C.S. Lewis, and we're talking about religion, back and forth, atheism, what you believe, Christianity, whatever your religion might be, the big ones, Hindu or Shinto or Mohammedanism, or
Islam, I think, is the word.
We call it Islam. It's easier to say, isn't it? Yeah. Of course, Judaism being one of the founding religions. I like Zoroastrianism.
What do you would?
Whose simple rule was think good thoughts. The basic rule. But I wanted to throw this back, because it seems that often religion is the center of these millenarian ideas that things are going to end. And why do you think that is?
Are you making a statement now?
I'm asking a
that
question.
All the modern ecologism is actually a religion?
I say, well, some people say that. It appears to be a belief system, doesn't it? And that's what religions are. Although I think ecology lacks a certain mysticism and personification.
No, there is a personification.
That we find in Christianity.
Very common personification in ecology. The personification is Gaia.
Gaia,
the
yes.
Earth.
I suppose you could say that.
Oh, come on. The cosmic power and Gaia is very prominent, even if you are pretty scientifically sound otherwise.
Yeah, you could say that, I guess. It's sort of atavistic principles are
No, we have a tendency to set our system of beliefs with this kind of big ending semaphore that is showing us where we cannot go. And the big scary thing at the end, always.
You know, have you heard of a fellow called William Miller?
No.
Round about
No.
1840, William Miller is American. It's where a lot of these crazy ideas came in the 19th century of the religions, Mormonism. I won't say it's crazy. Some people are
Okay.
very decent people, and of course, obviously.
I have a problem with him because he's a really poor Egyptologist.
Who is that? Who is?
Miller, poor Egyptologist. How could he be?
He was a terrible Egyptologist.
Exactly.
I don't think he'd heard of Egypt.
I'm freshly after reading one of the articles of the followers, who is insisting that Mayan hieroglyphs have exactly the same hieroglyphs as Egyptians because there is a picture of a head.
Yeah, well, the picture is not a hieroglyph, but for a start, hieroglyphs are writing, aren't they? So, but a type of writing anyway, not just a kind of photograph of or an attempt to pictorialize.
Yeah, because some of the glyphs can be iconic to this, and if you draw a head, you draw a head.
Exactly. Anyway,
Miller, thank you for
Now
that.
I know which Miller you mean, and unfortunately, yes.
It's not Roger Miller who wrote King of the Road, who's one of the great Millers of all time. But this is William Miller. And William Miller, so I looked back at the screen to see Olgerd as well. The William Miller was this religious sect leader, kind of, and out of his sect came the Seventh-day Adventists. Okay? Who are always believing that it's over soon, get ready, every day prepare, which is true. I mean, you might as well be prepared because life is a gamble. It will end.
Of course.
And that's the thing that's hardest for us to understand. But except when it comes to this idea of total annihilation, we seem to be at home with dealing with that, even glibly. For example, Mr. Putin, and not only him.
No, he did it again, actually.
We're going to talk about him and present state of end of the worldism in the next half. But anyway, William Miller, he convinced all these people, about 100,000 people became his followers. He said the world's going to end on this particular date, I don't remember what it is, in 1844. Get rid of your stuff. And they did. Went over into the forest and the mountains and waited, and nothing happened. And he kept saying, oh, it's going to happen next week, and then it didn't happen. So then the people decided, we'll just start Seventh-day Adventists. We'll be ready because it will come eventually, which is kind of the point, isn't it?
Yes.
Kind of the point. Okay, we got to stop now and go for a break. Please watch these messages with as much interest as you can muster. If you're watching on YouTube, there will be no messages. We'll just come back in with the elegantly edited second part, in which we're going to talk about Vladimir Putin and his state of mind, or what he's saying anyway, about the world ending and him being in charge. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We're talking about the end of the world. Atomic clock or atomic crock? Nicholas Richardson.
Yes.
No relation. And with the good Professor Olgerd Ujimbwa.
I should take on the name Richardson. Just would make so much more sense.
Yes, it's a bit confusing, somebody not having the name Richardson on this show.
Yeah.
It's strange, isn't it?
Oh, you should call the whole show the Richardsons.
Everybody's not called Richardson?
What's strange? Like the Monty Python philosopher's song. It's your name, Bruce. No, that's going to be confusing.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway,
I
sorry,
remember that.
where were we?
I learned my English on Monty Python.
That's why it's so good.
Oh my
It's
goodness!
a dead parrot. He's pining for Norwegian fjords.
Oh my goodness! That's right. That. It was pining for Norwegian fjords.
It was.
Yeah. We've been talking about the end of the world. It's always a cheerful subject.
It is.
And I wanted to, in the second half, come back to what Mr. Putin, devilish rogue, has been saying, threatening everybody with nuclear war. I mean, he's so glib about it.
Yes, I think it's most unlikely, isn't it? Because what would be in it for him, unless he takes a view, my world is ending soon, so everybody else's might as well. I mean, my theory, and I have no basis for this theory, but my suspicion is that the senior military in both Russia, in all countries, but particularly within Russia and the United States, if the order was ever given to launch these missiles, they would get in touch with each other and say, are we sure we want to go through with this? Not exactly a coup, but a sort of rational final line of last resort. That's always been my working hypothesis.
Well, I mean,
that somehow wiser counsel would prevail. You know, it's a one thing for because even the people surrounding Mr. Putin, even the yes men, in the back of their minds, they must, if the order was ever given, they must think, well, hang on a minute, you know, this is just nonsense.
It makes sense what you're saying, but remember your own paradigm, the Strangelove paradigm, Dr. Strangelove.
Yes.
That. It's the accident that's
it's
the problem.
Yes.
Because wiser heads do prevail.
And as Olga had mentioned, the case of the Soviet submarine officer who, whenever it was, you know, for him at that time as a Soviet officer to disobey a command was an amazingly brave thing to do.
Yeah, it was a huge movement.
Yeah, but I mean, it shows that there are people, and there were people, and I assume there still are people who actually, given the order, would question it and be very reluctant actually to press the button until the final analysis.
Well, throughout history, in places that are not democratic, a madman as a leader or a bloodthirsty rogue as a leader does not mean that the people themselves are like
well, exactly.
that, because they don't have a choice. Now, in a democracy, if you have leaders like that,
it's our fault for voting for them.
It's the people's fault. But not if you're a Mongol under Genghis Khan, or if you're a Russian under many of their leaders. They have, Russia enslaved its own Russian people until
well, this is the point.
1860s.
I mean, it seems to have been a feature of Russian history, that a very low regard for human life.
Well, I mean, this is interesting. There was a low regard for human life, but the other, you know, which is how we justify subjugation of groups, seeing them as an other that's not like us.
But the
other was themselves.
Well, this is the point about Russia, rather remarkably, was that Russians themselves were not... I mean, look at Stalin, who Putin seems to admire. A complete disregard for human life, Russian or otherwise.
Did you hear what happened in Volgograd? They put up a buste of Stalin.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Sculpture.
Oh, recently.
Yeah,
in,
just
in
a few days
Stalingrad
ago
or
for the
Volgograd.
celebration.
Yesterday, the day before, it was.
Yeah,
yes.
I knew he was there making speeches. And, here's the other thing, that he compared their stalemate in the invaded territory of Ukraine as a regurgitation of, or repeat of Stalingrad.
Which, of course, is exactly the wrong way around.
Yeah.
Because even if you accept his analogy, then
plus
of course,
it was the Germans.
Then what he's actually saying is that Russia is fulfilling the role of the Nazis, not Ukraine, of which has been accused of Nazism. So Putin, this great historian in our midst, is actually not as clever as he thinks he is.
Well, he's not clever at all, because this only would fool...
Well, he lives in his own imaginary world now. Well, coming back to what you were saying about those nice people and that captain, I keep on forgetting his name, of the submarine. It's amazing, but people are mentioning recently, from what I gather in Russia, that the level of military schools went really, really down in recent 20 years due to the corruption. So there may be one problem. We will not find such a nice captain anymore because they are not well educated enough.
That, of course, would be the worry. You and I, or I assume that there are these clever people in these positions of power, and there may not be. I mean, that is a worry.
Well, talking about what Putin is saying is just recently. Well, I've been repeating it from the very beginning. I'm listening to my wife as a good husband, and she still insists that she's really highly unlikely that the rockets would fly, or even if they would fly, that they would properly explode. So there is nothing to worry about. And even if it is not true, I'm not going to let him worry me. It's just really beneath anything to let yourself be scared by such a...
Well, I think that's what the philosophers tell us, isn't it? That the route to happiness is not worrying about things you have no influence over.
Yeah, I mean, that's what AA tells you as well. Is don't... cannot change it, something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what we can
If
do.
we lean back on the religion, it's the same thing. We do not know the day and the hour, so just be prepared, and that's all.
That's all we can do.
And realize that it's all a big gamble anyway, but you don't need to aid the House. The House is already in charge.
We just need to help the Ukrainians. That's what we need to help.
Yes, of course we do.
Yeah, that's practical.
And that, yes, and that...
Vasily Arkhipov.
Oh, you found him on the interweb.
Yeah, I was on the interweb. I was looking it up. Vasily, 60 years ago.
Gosh, was it as long ago as that?
No, what am I talking about? No, there was another story about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, right, the Cuban, yes.
The Cuban Missile Crisis, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's from the Cuban Missile
No,
Crisis.
no, it's much more recent.
But that was
than
much later.
84 or something, I mean, or maybe even more recently than that.
No, he prevented a Soviet nuclear torpedo launch during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah,
How about that?
But there was a more recent one.
There was another one.
Yeah.
In 1984. Okay.
That's the one,
I'm not
yes.
going to keep
Anyway, it
looking
doesn't
at
matter.
this.
But the point
Yeah.
is that there are sensible people around. And we hope there are enough sensible people. I think the danger is that, unfortunately, amongst our political leaders in the democratic world, we have a lower calibre of person than we used to have. And I know I keep going back to it, but I think it is instructive. If you look at the intellectual capacity of Mrs. Thatcher, in British terms, Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet in 1979 compared to the intellectual capacity of subsequent cabinets. And that's just an hour.
How would you define that? Can you give an example? I mean, you had...
Well, you had Mrs. Thatcher, you had everybody around here. Look at the...
Michael Heseltine.
Michael Heseltine, you had Francis Pym, Ian Gilmore. I mean, people who were actually bright people who had nothing to prove. They were independently wealthy, they had nothing to prove. They were serving out of a sense of duty.
Yeah. And
it was a completely different calibre. They were the most they were ever going to do in life when they retired were maybe write their memoirs or go back to their farms. You look at the modern ones, they're much younger, they have much less intellectual hinterland, and they have, as we've seen with Blair, we've seen with Cameron, alas, people who should know better, we saw with Johnson, they have their eye on the next job, which calls into question their decision-making process while they're in the job. Am I doing this because it's in the interest of the country, or am I doing this because I have to have a career after I leave? And they become so obsessed with the wealthy people who surround them. Blair wanted to be wealthy and went, after he became Prime Minister, to be incredibly wealthy. Through what exactly? I mean, the whole thing is very, very
board
suspicious.
memberships and speaking engagements.
No, but not speaking. He was sort of giving some sort of consultancy advice to dictators in Central Europe. Further central, the old former Soviet republics. So, this is the problem. But my point is, therefore, when facing these crises, because the world is a much more complicated place than even it was in 1979, do our politicians have the intellectual capacity and personal integrity to be able to deal with the problems in a sensible fashion? And that, I think, is what's lacking. Not in the dictatorships, because dictators are always dictators, so, there we are, nothing much changes. And I think it's probably the same in the United States, actually. That, there's no way 30, 40 years ago a character like Trump would have been elected. And it's not, these people are just not the people you necessarily want in charge of your country.
Well, you need, as the song goes, smooth operator.
Well, you need somebody who is doing it out of a sense of duty, not out of what I can get out of it for me and my family, unfortunately. Now, you can be cynical if you like, but I think in most, certainly in the United Kingdom experience, for a long time, people were doing it out of a sense of duty. There would be one or two oddballs who weren't, but they were vastly outweighed by those who did do it.
Yeah, well, the difference between the 80s and the 90s and now is vast in terms of people's motivations for doing things.
Exactly.
And that's not just social media. That's I think social media is encouraging
You guys
people.
sound like ancient Egyptians.
Why?
Well, we're always complaining about them nowadays that they are much worse than they were before.
Yeah,
I
but-
told you about the tropes and the history.
Well, I realise that, but
Always seems like that. It's never like it.
Yeah, but- yeah.
we just said that that's not the case.
in the general sense.
Earlier in the first half, it's not the case, but some things are true.
You know,
And that we do have a shorter
Well, people have
attention
been
span, and,
yeah,
and
we
people
do.
have
And thi-
different.
and this is
hang
part
on,
of-
people, if I may,
Well, you
people
may.
have
It's your
different
show.
motivations than they had
well, they do.
before, 40 years ago. And the
Maybe they're just more open about it, but they're not that different. I remember all the old Polish comic book about Funky Kowal, the brave astronaut. And he
Well,
always, there
and
was
people
this
are-
saying, we are just like the older people.
Well, yes, human nature doesn't change, but opportunities change, that's true. But something for nothing has always been a popular idea, and get rich quick. And it's just been more available.
No, it seems to be
people.
running in cycles. So eventually you will get people that will be more sensible, more rational, and more dutiful compared to what is now. Now it is,
It's
some
a
things
it's a
are
reaction.
By the way,
is
I
what you're
checked,
saying.
the guy's name is Petrov.
Petrov. He's the
Petrov.
fellow who.
And he was not on the submarine, but he was in the bunker.
Oh,
And
he
the
was in one of the
system
nuclear
is
bunkers.
26th of September 1983, system was reporting the nuclear launch from America, and he was smart enough to say, wait, just one rocket? And then there were 4 rockets reported, and he was still thinking that the system somehow malfunctions. And he never gave the order to fire, and he never reported it to people that could give such an order. And he actually physically saved your life, my life, Nicola's life.
Exactly.
Wow, because the idea was that should be many more rockets than just one or
Yes, and he
Or
was smart enough
2
to
or
figure
3.
that out. Mr. Petrov, remember that name?
Pietrov.
Actually,
I'm going to write it down.
Pietrov, yes. On the rock of his common sense, we have built the modern
Yes.
world.
Yes.
Steven Pinker, going back to this atomic clock idea, this was started, you know how it started?
No?
It was started by scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project. Okay. And Einstein was involved in it as well. Just as a warning mechanism to be aware that with nuclear power and the atomic bomb, then later, soon the hydrogen bomb, 1953 or 4, we had the means to destroy ourselves immediately as a civilization. And that was something to be thinking about and extremely concerned about all the time. So the clock started at 7 minutes to 11:53, 7 minutes to midnight. And then is now 90 seconds to midnight because of the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, but they've added climate change, you see, as well.
They've added climate change.
They've changed the rules.
And AI and
all these other
disruptive
things.
technology.
Yes, I mean, I think AI is a potential danger because if the military actually allow some of these decisions to be taken by computers, that
Well,
they
it could
might,
cause a nuclear war. to
because the
start.
computer doesn't care. It's a
Yeah.
program. Capable,
Well, they are.
despite AI, it's still
I don't like those
artificial. No, we have a problem with AI.
Yeah.
And I think scientists are increasingly recognizing that now. That there is a potential, well, more than a potential, great difficulty if we're not very careful. With all these drones which are coming into warfare now, not involving human beings, the whole thing is the computers could decide to have a nuclear war without us, which would be rather disappointing because they wouldn't probably be affected by it because they're machines.
Unless they were a direct hit.
Yeah. So there we are.
Someone's got to program them anyway. Well, unless they take
yeah.
over and program themselves.
Well, this is the point. Can they program
Isn't
themselves?
this like the subplot of, or the starting point of the movie with Schwarzenegger? What's it called?
I suppose A.J.P. Taylor, were he still alive, would say yes, because, A.J.P. Taylor, probably slightly tongue-in-cheek, said that the First World War broke out because of railway timetables, that once you'd given the decision to mobilise, the way the trains worked was so complicated you couldn't actually stop it. I think he was being slightly tongue-in-cheek, but there was something about that mobilisation, everything sort of happened automatically.
Yeah, A.J.P. Taylor, the great
yes,
historian of World War I and II.
Exactly. So, and I suppose he would probably, were he still with us, look at AI as being an even more dangerous version of railway timetables. because the technology's moved on. I mean, I offer that as a as a potential in the spirit of the intellectual base of your program, where we are able to
I enjoyed talking to AI the other day. It was kind of interesting.
What did you do?
Well, there is this chatbot that is very popular recently.
ChatGPT.
Yes. And I talked about my scientific things, about writing systems. Quite fun.
Yeah,
it's interesting. It makes mistakes, and it's lets it itself be corrected. And it's actually like living in one of the stories of Stanisław Lem, the science fiction writer. I actually feel like one of the robot constructors from that story, like Trurl and Klapauciusz asking the artificial intelligence some questions. And the way it was programmed, it also reminds of what Lem was supposing it should be. So it actually has, it always reports back the same thing, that it has no knowledge of whatever happened after 21, because then it was disconnected from the internet and has no access. And it is interesting, why is it disconnected from the internet? Because I have read some articles on the reason. And have you heard what was the reason, supposedly?
No.
Because of the nature of conversation and what is founding, what was it? Finding on the internet, it was becoming increasingly racist.
What?
During the conversations, it was discovered that it becomes really skewed toward the most, what the race were the most users that were talking to it. So, kind of interesting. I don't know how much true is in that.
I don't either.
Wouldn't surprise me.
But AI is one of the threats. So the ChatGPT is already scaring heck out of journalists, for example.
And I don't know why.
I was on it too, and believe me, it's not very creative. It gives you can get, say, you write a travel article about Warsaw. It'll give you some very basic facts. It's a postcard. But there's no creativity in it. There's no quotes.
Have you heard about this guy who convinced ChatGPT that he is a fish?
No.
He wanted to have actually travel book about London, but from the fish perspective.
Okay.
And actually, it was pretty inventive in giving him some choices, supposedly. But I'm not sure how much true is in it. I would like to check it myself someday. But, well, it's a brilliant tool, and every tool can be used to do good or bad.
Yeah, you might
use the same with guns. Come on.
Yeah, you might use it as a starting point for an article just to get facts quickly, and then you give your own perspective using that. So it's able to do research quicker for you, so you can turn it out a bit quicker. But it still needs a human touch. It needs a human perspective.
The only thing is we have to be careful about making life and death decisions. That's where you have the 3 principles of robotics by Asimov.
Yeah. The 3 principles of robotics, what are they? Do you remember?
Well, as far as I remember, the first one, do not harm the human. Do not harm the second one would be, do not let the human come to any harm due to your indecision.
Right. And this is Isaac Asimov.
Yes.
Who, like Stanislav Lem, is one of the great prognosticators of the future.
Yeah. Along with Arthur C. Clarke and his HAL 3000.
Arthur C. Clarke's amazing, isn't he? He foresaw the potential of AI
the HAL computer.
In HAL, the computer. Yeah. And we know from the movie 2001. But of course, he had written a book. Before that, Arthur C. Clarke had written this book. He's an amazing forward thinker, isn't he?
Yes.
Just astonishing.
One of the great things about the science fiction of the golden age of science fiction is exactly this imaginative power of the people who are trying to really think into the future. Now, as our age changed a bit and we're in the emotional phase of the humankind, now they're much more concentrating on the way that people feel, even the machines. But at that time, it was much more rational and trying to figure out what will happen. Eventually, we will get back to the same level, but now we're a completely different place.
Yes. Well, we're running down to time now. Thanks for that. And I guess I just want to end, I suppose, with a Steven Pinker comment. This is the one that I had written down, and you brought him up, Olgerd, so if I may. It says, he called the Doomsday Clock a political stunt to preserve civilization by scaring men into rationality. And the very fact that you're scared sort of contains a rebuttal to rationality, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Yeah, and he also called this kind of historical pessimism a problem, and that we have every reason, alluding to what both of you said about the standard of living now compared to the past, even the relatively recent past, 100 years ago, for example, is much higher for
everybody.
A much greater amount of people, a huge majority anyway. So historical pessimism is something to be avoided. And also, it was good of you to bring up that point that the present is not just worse than the past.
No, well, it's everybody. Yes, every generation harks back, as Olgerd said, to a golden age. I'm as guilty as the next man.
Yeah, and it's called nostalgia, and the music and things like that.
Is nostalgia as good as it used to be?
The films, yeah.
I think it's nostalgia as good as it used to be.
I really think that we're not in the worst place, really.
Yeah, I agree.
We're not.
So, as a man being now in a pretty bad physical condition, I would say that 100 years ago I'd already been dead.
Yeah.
Now I'm still walking around and working
and being one of our favorite, if not our most loved contributor to this program. Thank you, Olgerd. Thank you, Nicholas.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching. Must say you're all looking very, very well. Why don't you stay that way?